So this is my this is my video explaining my project and how it works. So we got including the LCD library, constant integers explaining or locking these button pins to certain pins in the Arduino, or these variables. Logic variables, which uh, do change. So button push counter keeps track of the current number in the game. Current state of button one and button state and button state two keeps track of the current states of button one and two. Last button state, last button state two keep track of the previous button states of those buttons. Player equals essentially how many times a button has been pressed, and current player displays the or keeps track of which player's turn it is. These are all just for the LCD locking or yeah, associating these variables with certain button or with certain pins in the Arduino. Setup, this part of the code runs one time when you first start up. So this is just setting both these pins as inputs. This is for testing on my end. Sets the dimensions of the LCD and then prints player one start in the LCD when you start up. So this part does loop continuously, thousands of times a second. So this just sets the cursor to 0, 0 in the LCD. This sets button state and button state 2 to the digital reading of button pin and button pin 2. So those pins into the Arduino. And then current player just displays the current player by taking how many times the button has been pressed, dividing by 2, and then adding the remainder of that to 1. So now there's the important stuff. So when the button state does not equal its previous button state, it does this if statement. So if it's high, meaning the button has just been pressed, it adds 1 to player and 1 to push counter, button push counter. And when it changes because you let go, so it does nothing. And then there's a little delay. And then all this stuff is for the screen. The reason it is inside the button if statement is because if it's outside, it technically works, but then it's constantly being scanned and constantly, doing outputs, meaning it flickers. So since I only need it to change when when a button has been pressed or after a button has been pressed, I put it in here so that way it doesn't flicker. Um, and then down here, the last thing is setting the last button state equal to the current button state. So that this is required in order for this if statement to work. And then down here, I have the same thing except it's for button 2. So the only difference is button push counter gets increased by 2 instead of 1. And I set in a little contingency or whatever you want to call it in case you go above 21. This is only needed in button 2 because you can't go above 21 if you're only adding 1. So this is for specifically if the number is at 20 and someone tries adding 2. So this, just makes fun of you and tells you how to count. And that's the entire program.